Good day, first world travellers, and welcome back, and welcome to a very cold Sunday morning in central London. I'm at Green Park, London Underground station in central London, near Buckingham Palace, by the way, to bring you a series of videos all about the Tube, the London Underground, and also getting around in London. So if you're a tourist or simply just new to London and want to know how to get around in London, stay tuned.
I'm so happy and you're so kind. You want more money, of course I don't mind. My nuclear textbooks for atomic brains, and the public gets what the public wants. But I want nothing society got. I'm going underground. Well, if the brass bands play up, start to pound, going underground.
So just a little disclaimer before I get started. These videos are very much based on my experience of the London Underground as a Londoner. Secondly, as I've spent a lot of time in Asia over the last year, I wanted to aim these videos particularly towards Asian tourists, so Japan, China, Hong Kong, those sorts of places. And due to that, I'm going to be making a few comparisons to Asian subway systems. So without further ado, let's get started. So as I take a little walk through a very cold Green Park, I'll tell you about a few terms or acronyms I'm going to be using throughout these videos, which are hopefully going to really help you out, and you really need to know them before you come to London. The first one is TfL. This stands for Transport for London. Basically, this describes all of the different forms of public transport in London, from taxis, London buses, the tram in South London, the Overground, the DLR, the Elizabeth line or Crossrail, the Emirates airline, and also the Tube, which brings me nicely onto the next one. The Tube. Everyone knows this saying, right? It's the London Underground. It's the word used to describe the subway, the metro, the MTR, or the MRT if you're from an Asian country. And the reason, of course, it is called the Tube is quite simply because of the fact that the tunnels look like a tube. The third one I've mentioned already, the DLR. This is the Docklands Light Railway. It's an unmanned light rail system which started up in 1987, which you can find in East and South East London. There will be a separate video on this. You can access that by clicking on the link up above. And the final one is Oyster, or Oyster card. Now this is the stored value card which you can use to get around London very easily and cheaper than other methods. This is very similar to cards like the Osmo card in Tokyo, the public transportation card in Shanghai, and the Octopus card in Hong Kong. Also, that will be covered in the next video. So I've had to take a seat because walking around is very tiring at this time in the morning. Let's talk a bit about the basics and the history of the London Underground. So you may know this already, that the London Underground, or the Tube, is the oldest subway system in the world. It's over 150 years old, and due to this there are many issues with it which you would expect due to the age, which I find very frustrating, especially after being to many Asian countries. And if you're an Asian tourist and you're used to the standard in your country, you might be a little bit shocked. So just to preempt you, the Tube is dirty, it's old, it's smelly, it's unreliable, very unreliable. You can eat and drink on the Tube. It's quite acceptable to have loud conversations on the phone, and there are also no women-only carriages. I'm going to be covering Tube problems and Tube frustrations in another video. Again, you can check that out up above. Okay, in terms of the times in which the Tube operates between, it's from roughly about 5 AM to about 1 AM every day, with the exception of Friday and Saturday. Yes, this is the night Tube. You can pick up one of these leaflets at every station, by the way. Now, since 2016, the Tube has operated overnight, 24 hours, on a Friday and Saturday on selected lines. So it's on the Central, Victoria, Jubilee, Northern and Piccadilly. I believe it will be extended in future, but at the moment, those are the only lines you can use. So if you're out experiencing the nightlife in central London, the night Tube is a great way of getting home. So you don't have to worry about getting a night bus or a taxi, which aren't always the best experiences, if I'm honest. Now let's look at the Tube map. Now if you're from a large Asian city like Tokyo, for example, you're more than likely very used to large, extensive, potentially complicated subway systems and maps, and the London Underground is no exception. So let's have a look. There are 10 lines on the London Underground, but the thing that people get confused with sometimes is the fact that there are other aspects of public transport on the Tube map. Give you a few examples. So in the south of London, the Tube isn't particularly extensive, with the exception of the Northern line, which goes down to Morden, and also the Victoria line, which goes down to Brixton. Other than that, you have the tram, which is the light green line, which goes from Wimbledon through Croydon to Beckenham in the southeast. Other than that, your transport in South London will be slightly difficult. Over in the east and southeast, you have the DLR, the Docklands Light Railway, which goes around Canary Wharf area down to Lewisham and Woolwich. You also have Crossrail, which is the purple line, or the Elizabeth line it's now called, which is currently under construction. You have the Overground, which is the orange line, and lastly you also have the Emirates Airline, which is basically a cable car that goes across the Thames from Greenwich. Now let's look at getting around in London. So in terms of a tube map, you can pick up one of these at most tube stations, but if you're living in the 21st century, like pretty much the rest of us, you can download an app. I use this one from Google Play or Apple Store. Very useful, just like every other app you can use all over the world. And finally, let's just talk about one thing which I will cover more in later videos, and they are zones. What are zones? Okay, I'll explain. So in most Asian subway systems and pretty much all over the world, this doesn't exist. So normally you have a single fare for your single trip on the subway, regardless of how long you're traveling, the distance, how many stations you're going through. This is very different in London. Obviously London is overcomplicated unnecessarily. And the way I can think of explaining this is by looking at the solar system. Let's have a look at that now. So imagine this is London and the sun is central London, and the orbit of each planet represents a zone. So you have zone 1, zone 2, zone 3 and so on. So let's go back to the tube map and you can see what I'm talking about. So you can see this very much with the shaded areas. They represent the zones. Basically, if you're going to travel through zone 1, it's going to be more expensive for you. So if you have to travel from west to east and you want to save money, it's a good idea to avoid zone 1 completely, which can be slightly complicated. And the last thing you need to know about are peak and off-peak times. I'll put the details of this next to my head. Basically, during peak times, it's going to cost you more to use the tube. If you're traveling in off-peak times, it will cost you less. Very simple, but slightly overcomplicated. Now, it would be very difficult for me to give you a cost of an average trip across London because, like I said, the zones and peak and off-peak times make it very difficult for me to do that. But just to give you an example, let's have a look at the tube map again. I used to live in Hounslow Central on the Piccadilly line. I used to travel every day to work to Bromley by Bow on the District line. At peak times, because I was going through zone 1, this cost me £3.80 one way. If I was doing it off-peak, it would cost me £2.70, so it's quite a difference. So that was part 1 of my tube series. I hope you have found this useful. If you have found it useful, don't forget to hit that like button, leave a comment as well, tell me about your experience on the London Underground, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thank you very much. Next up is a video about how to pay for your travel on the London Underground, particularly talking about the Oyster card, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.
Get some pleasure out to hate me, I've enough.